Hello, in my continuing campaign through the Oxford Mark Twain, I've reached the next book, which is Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I just noticed the title is actually different from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which has a "the." For some reason, Twain chose not to have the word "the," it's just Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So it's amazing how I never noticed that until now. But anyways, this is, without a doubt, Twain's most highly esteemed book. It's in American literature, you'd be hard pressed to find a book more renowned as a classic, quote unquote. You know, there's a few others, maybe The Great Gatsby or To Kill a Mockingbird, maybe On the Road, Gravity's Rainbow perhaps, but I think Huckleberry Finn is just, because it's 19th century, and Twain is just such a mammoth presence on literature in the 19th century and transitioning into the 20th, that for whatever reason this book stands out as, in the American identity of literature, what is possible in literature and how literature functions. For whatever reason, the scope of how the narrative works, the characters, and perhaps most importantly the voice. This is told in the first person, whereas Tom Sawyer's in the third person. And getting inside Huck's head and hearing his dialects, and Twain points out in the intro or foreword that there are a wide variety of dialects used in this book. It's not grammatically correct English by any means, whatever that means. But it is closer to how people spoke. And I like the voice. It's a challenge sometimes, but it's worth it. And I like this book overall. It's my favorite by far in this series of Mark Twain books, and it's so better than some of the books, like The Gilded Age, for example. It's just it has a narrative arc, like I said, but it offers Twain a lot of room to wiggle around and do some detours. And typically Twain is known for his digressions and his rambling style, and that's not absent here, but there's a driving force to the book, a conflict that you don't always see. And yeah, I recommend it and like it a lot. Huckleberry Finn, Huckleberry, Huckleberry Finn. A lot of critics of this book have been quick to point out that later in the book there's an incident. I mean, I don't think I'm giving a lot away by saying that. If you don't want to spoiler, don't go on, but from here on I'm going to talk a little about the plot. But Jim, this escaped slave, and Huck are on the river. And some of the best moments are just Twain describing the process of traveling on the river, forgetting about time. He doesn't even make clear what state they're in. They don't seem to even know or care. It's just a matter of fleeing and being in this moment of transportation and escape. It reminds me a lot of On the Road, actually. Maybe Jack Kerouac was thinking of On the Road. I mean, was thinking of Huckleberry Finn when he wrote On the Road. I don't think it was that deliberate. It's more just a matter of to be an American, whatever that is, to be in this society that is so... I mean, a part of America is about being free of your position defined by a role, and the ability to leave that role and leave your job, leave your state, your city, whatever, at any moment and escape. That's like, there's the American dream of the home and family and all that, but then there's this also alternative dream that recognizes the limitations of that and just wants to escape. And we have such a vast country that traveling across rivers or highways or however you do it is just it's such a tempting option. So I think that Twain and Kerouac both really capture that. Anyways, back to Twain and Huckleberry Finn. They're on the river a lot for a huge part of this novel. I would say maybe 3/4 of the novel. They're just traveling, escaping, hiding, having adventures. there's these two guys that are both con artists that they encounter that they're a major part of the novel, that really strong characters throughout this book. Like almost every character is very strong. But then the part that a lot of people criticize is the later section where they arrive at the home of Tom Sawyer's, I want to say his aunt and uncle, and Huck pretends to be Tom Sawyer, and then Tom shows up and he pretends to be Tom's cousin Sid. It's more connected to Tom Sawyer, the original book, than the rest of Huckleberry Finn, which almost stands alone. It doesn't have many characters from Tom Sawyer. But for whatever reason, Mark Twain decided to connect them, and the plot at that point becomes, because Tom Sawyer is so obsessed with adventure and turning into things out of like the Count of Monte Cristo, the Three Musketeers, that sort of adventure. And Huck and Jim just want to escape and not have Jim become a slave again. But Tom is just like, we got to do this in the way that these old adventure books say, and it just becomes this really convoluted attempt to free Jim. And later on we'll learn that Jim has already in fact been freed. Tom's aunt had died and freed Jim in the will. So it's just, Tom's kind of like an asshole in this book, because he could have just told them that, but he just didn't care. He was so obsessed with adventure that maybe that's why, I don't know, I never thought about that until now. Maybe that's why the book doesn't have the word adventure, because Huck's adventures are just constant and they're always around him, whereas Tom's adventures, the adventures, are something that Tom creates himself, and he really encapsulates in this adventure genre mystique that isn't really there. I'm probably exaggerating the reason for the word "the," but anyways. So yeah, back to that really built up attempt to escape, why do I keep saying escape as a verb, to free Jim. It is a bit convoluted reading it through, but I don't know, I kind of like it in some ways. It does really show that the difference between Tom and Huck, and for whatever reason I still like this book a lot. It's one of the books, the rare books, that when you finish it you want to go back and read it again right away. I did anyways. I'm not going to right now. Some other aspects of the book, the illustrations are, I don't know who did the illustrations, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. It's not True Williams though, I will point that out, who did the Tom Sawyer illustrations. They're very consistent illustrations, but they're starting to lack the cartooniness and the character that you see in a lot of his earlier books. True Williams, even though he's not the best artist, like there are more proficient artists. I'm going to get to Connecticut Yankee next too, and the illustrations in that are very well done, but they lack, and same with Huckleberry Finn, they lack the character, the personality in the faces. So I don't care for these illustrations as much. I would have loved to see True Williams do this book, but whatever, he can't have it all. And this book is really great. It's, yeah, it and Tom Sawyer are the only ones at this point that I would say you should read if you have any interest in American literature, or even if you just want to try Mark Twain. These are great books. Huckleberry, Huckleberry. At this point in Twain's writings, I think he has started to recognize that it's not moralizing, I wouldn't say that, Huckleberry Finn, but it does have more conscious awareness of slavery and individuality and human rights. I think Twain has started to, he just had to force himself to acknowledge that that is where he's at, and to just like not include things like that and just make it about a series of frivolous adventures wouldn't be doing justice to who he was at this point in his career. In the next book, Connecticut Yankee, I'll talk about that more actually later. But let me just say, yeah, I feel like he strikes the perfect balance in this book of having a moral but not preaching it and shoving it down your throat. It's there, and Tom Sawyer almost cancels it out, and by having Huck Finn tell the story in the first person, it really brings you closer to the identity of his transformation and seeing that, yes, he's breaking the law by freeing Jim and keeping this escaped slave, but he just forces himself to the conclusion that this is right, this is what he has to do, and that's a really strong character choice, and I like it, and I think this book is an amazing story, and yeah, I would love to read it again anytime. It's one of the best books in American literature, and I know that's such a cliche, but it's true because it is. It's just so well done, and the narrative voice. Yeah, I just love this book. I never saw until this point how many branches of other authors, whether it's Kurt Vonnegut or even something like Robert Heinlein, his voice, the way that he talks, I never really saw that until I started reading more Twain to realize what an influence. They're both from Missouri, so I guess it's only natural, but the way that he tells the story, reading Robert Heinlein growing up was one of my big influences, and I don't think I care for him as much anymore, but I could see where he gets a lot of his style from. But yeah, not just him, Vonnegut, who else? I don't know. Of course, yeah. What's her name? I'm blanking. To Kill a Mockingbird. Harper Lee, her voice. I see that a lot. The fridge is going, I'm going to stop. Actually, I'm just going to end it and say that, yeah, read Huckleberry Finn if you haven't. Actually, read Tom Sawyer first, but they're both really good books.